Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the session on the role of landscape solutions in mitigating water resources stress. It's a session of 1 hour with different speakers from different places in the world, from the Netherlands, from Vietnam, from Kenya, and from Ethiopia. And we would like to jointly bring you a message on what landscape solutions could do in mitigating water resources stress. Could you show my next slide, please? This session is brought to you by a program called Waterworks. And Waterworks, before we start the other presentations, I would like to give you a short introduction on what Waterworks actually is. As I mentioned, Waterworks is a program which is implemented jointly by all the Dutch drinking water utilities together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is also visible on the next slide, please. And with those 10 Dutch water utilities, we have partnerships with 40 water utilities in developing and emerging economies in both Asia and Africa. And what we jointly with the 50 utilities want to do is to improve water services and create sustainable access to water and sanitation for 10 million people by 2030, with the idea that it would contribute to Sustainable Development Goal number 6. And what we do, you can find there on the how. We engage with partners, and we have operator support, in which we help utilities improve their performance. We try to mobilize and acquire finance for investments to scale and have people connected, and help improve the enabling and policy environment to sustain the results of the improved water utility operations. Next slide. In this session, we would like to show you some of the work that we've been doing over the last years, which relates to the long-term water resources availability of utilities. We have been working on what we've called Climate Resilient Water Resources Plans 2050, in which we have mapped the future water demands of the cities we work in, and also looked at the available water resources with the idea that it's of course, that the demand and supply need to be matched. And we also took, changes with respect to climate, rainfall, for example, changes in rainfall, extreme rainfall, which is in many cases the case, but also extreme droughts into account in order to see what could happen for the future. And the idea is that these plans will help in preparing utilities for the long run, and also help them in finding potential solutions, and these in many cases are landscape solutions to alleviate water resources scarcity. And what we want to do in this session, next slide, is to show you some of these results. We have 4 presentations. The first presentation is by Maarten of Acacia Water, and he will provide a more general sketch, setting the scene, we've called that, to show paint a picture on the increasing global pressure on urban water resources due to urbanization and climate change. After Maarten's presentation, we have a presentation from Romano, Radjkoemar from Vietnam, together with Sefer Eslami from Deltares, and they are working on a landscape approach for ensuring seasonal freshwater storage in the Mekong Delta in Vietnam. The second case study is from Kenya, where Lawrence Kimaru and his team are working on what we've called Sponge City, water storage inside the city in order to alleviate seasonal water scarcity. And the third case study is from Ethiopia, presented by my colleague Daniel Truneh, and he will talk about water resources challenges due to institutional complexity, urban growth, deforestation, and erosion related to farming in the catchment of Addis Ababa. Now, for the ones following this session, we would like you to join somehow in the question and answers. And if you go to on the right side, you can find the Q&A. And if you have a question related to one of the presentations or in general, please post them. The idea is that we have a presentation first, we have one question, next presentation, another question, and at the end of the session, we have 5 or 10 minutes left to discuss more general about what we have dealt with in this past hour. So I'm going to give now the word to Maarten. Maarten works with Acacia as a senior specialist in water resources management. Maarten.
Yes, thank you very much, Adriaan, for the introduction. I'm Maarten Waterloo, and I will be setting the scene, as Adriaan told you. Next slide, please. So we're talking about water supply operators, and these have station plants that have a limited area, and their domain is what they do at the plant, but they're located in the public domain, so much larger catchment, which forms their source and from which the demand is coming. And there are several external pressures that they experience, and one is population growth, so the demand goes up, and with that you also have land use change, and you get climate change, of course. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. Okay, in this sense, we need to talk about resilience. And you can see the image on screen, and you see a ball in a lower valley, and that you could consider the optimal state. And the optimal state is if you have enough water supply to cover your demand, and if there's a change in water supply or in the demand, you can easily cope with that. Now, most water supply companies are not in the valley, but they're moving upwards, and that is because there are population growth stresses and climate change stresses. So you see the reddish ball, which is moving up the hill, and if you would move up the hill and past the tipping point, you would get a new situation, a new system state. And in that state, say that the company relies on 2 or 3 different water sources, and imagine that one water source would be contaminated and you can't use it anymore. And if that is permanent or over large time, you would have a permanent position in a new stable condition, and that stable condition would mean that your supply is not enough to cover your demand. And that's something that we should avoid. So you preferably want to stay in that optimal state. And in order to do so, you see the blue arrow that's marked by strategy. You need a strategy to cope with these external pressures. Now we're going to discuss these pressures now. So next slide, please. The first pressure is the population growth. In my youth, we were with 3 billion people. At the moment, we are above 7. And in 2050 or so, we will be with 10 billion people on this globe. And the current rate of growth is about 82 million people extra on Earth per year. And on the map, you can see where the largest growth is, the bluish green areas. And these are not areas where you have a lot of water often. So this is one of the stresses that occurs on the water supply systems, especially if cities start growing a lot, that the demand rises a lot and your supplies are not increasing that much. Next slide, please. With the increase in population, you also need to produce more food, and for food production, you need to have more water. So there's competition between the domestic water supply and the agricultural water supply. Similarly, because we need more land to grow food, you have deforestation, you have conversion of land to agriculture, and with that you often have soil degradation. And this affects the water quantities. If you deforest, you get lower evaporation, and then you get more moisture in the soil and more runoff, and that leads to flooding. And you might potentially have higher groundwater recharge. But you also have erosion and sediment yields that affect the quality of source water if you use river water. And with increased agriculture, you also have nutrient leaching, nitrate, for instance, and you have this higher sediment yields and pesticide leaching. So these are all threats to the quality of a water supply. Secondly, if you increase food production, you need to go to dry season food production, and that needs to be irrigation in a lot of areas. So you're increasing evaporation and you're reducing the dry season water availability. So this is something that affects your supply and the water quality. Next slide, please. On top of that, we have climate change. And in the left image, you see the temperature-related potential evaporation. And the increase in temperature with the COP26 going on in Glasgow, I think everybody realizes that the temperature change is quite certain. And you also see a very narrow band of uncertainty along that dark blue line, which is the average of a number of models. And you see that the potential evaporation goes up. And this has impacts on reservoirs in which we store fresh water, but also on irrigation water use. Similarly, precipitation will change, and that's what you see in the right-hand slide, and this is for Kigali in Rwanda. So this might differ. In other locations, precipitation might actually go down, but here you see that the uncertainty in precipitation estimates is much larger, and that the precipitation increase doesn't compensate entirely for the evaporation increase in this case. So there's again a question of your supply. Can you maintain your supply such that you can fulfill the demand with the growing population? Next slide, please. So traditionally, people have used dam reservoirs to store water for water supply. And in the recent past, people have begun realizing that this might not be an option for the future because there are social and environmental constraints to placing dams. Dam locations are much harder to find nowadays because most locations where it was easy to construct a dam have already been used. And there is a question of long-term sustainability because these dams or the reservoirs will fill up with sediment in time. So there's a realization that we need to have different methods to store water. And one of these is to use nature-based solutions and store water in the landscape. Next slide, please. And we call this the 3R principle, which stands for recharge, retain, and reuse of water. So we harvest water in the wet season when you have plenty and when it would run off sometimes to sea. And then you store it in the landscape, and when you need it in the dry season, you can extract that water and use it again for agriculture or for domestic water supply or industry. And because these measures are small scales, like sand dams, stone bunds, half moons, you can involve local population, increasing awareness, and you can do these on hill slopes or in stream. So these are the two things that you could do to store water in the landscape. Next slide, please.
Maarten, 2 minutes.
Yes, thanks. Okay, so we talked about strategy before in terms of resilience, and the strategy is then integrated water resources management. And to do that, you have to develop a knowledge base. So you need to have some scientific data to work with. You need to have a dialogue between the water supply companies and the stakeholders, because mainly the water authorities have the domain in which to do landscape scale measures, and these are not the water supply operators themselves. You need to set up the strategies and then implement them and then plan for long-term investments and interventions. And when you've done so, you have to go back and check and monitor to see if things are working efficiently and then continue in this cycle. Next slide, please. So the procedure to do that is to establish a baseline, and identify the local threats to your water supply, then find solutions to quantify, to get a good quantity and quality of water. And these solutions are mostly outside the domain of the water supply operator. So you have to work together, stakeholder engagement. Firstly, with water authorities that are capable of managing the source areas. And you need to set up a mechanism to do that. And in Nakuru, Kenya, they have such a mechanism now. You need to implement then water harvesting techniques to increase water resources availability and improve water quality. And on the demand side, you also have to reduce, for instance, non-revenue water, so that you have more available water available to clients. And you could develop an awareness program to encourage water saving measures. So these are the things that would work to get a future-proof, resilient water supply for urban or even rural situations. And with that, I want to conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maarten. I think this gives a very good introduction into the topic we are addressing today. Before we go into the next presentation, for the audience, if you have any questions or remarks, there is a Q&A opportunity on the right side of the screen. So please ask your questions. Maarten, I have a question for you. You showed the slides on the IWRM planning process. What, in your experience, is the main barrier of implementing landscape solutions?
Main barrier is, I think, a kind of coordination between stakeholders. That people implement. These are often traditional ways of harvesting water, but the water authorities and the planning on catchment scale does not occur yet. And I think that would help if you would have a very active water authority working together with stakeholders, industry, agriculture, water supply companies, and then look at that catchment as a unit and then determine where water will be allocated, where such measures are planned to be most efficiently, working most efficiently. And I think now it's more or less everybody does something, but there's no coordination. And I think that's the main barrier for getting good water management in many places.
Okay, thanks, Maarten. I think we'll get back to that in the end of the session. I think there's also good examples being presented in the coming three presentations. So let's move now to Romano Radjkoemar from Vietnam in the Mekong Delta. Romano, you're in Kanto, I know.
Yes.
And you have a presentation on the work you're doing in the Mekong Delta. So I would like to give you the floor and share your insights and lessons for us.
Yes, thank you for your introduction, Adriaan, and nice presentation, Maarten, as well. And I think it can be linked to each other. I'm based in Kanto and working on with the Mekong Regional Water Security Initiative. On the right side, you see some pictures from 2016 that were made by Deltares in the dry season. And you see that there is less water. It's a cooperation between the Royal Embassy, Deltares, and wij, where we are looking into the water supply plans for the Mekong Delta. First of all, I would like to have a short index, the WOP linkage, the physical conditions, the master plans, the solutions, and the partners where we are working with. The water operator linkage between Vietnam and the Netherlands is visible because from AIWWW2021 we saw also a salinity intrusion at our water treatment plants in Kralingen and Berenplaat. But it also can be stopped by sluice gate management, and then you see no salinity intrusion. But there has to be other parties also involved. As we look into the Mekong Delta, we see also the modeling of Separ Aslami, and we see that the salinity intrusion is happening, and the water companies are already facing it. I have a small video about for who are we doing this? This is some field visit that we did in Vietnam, and we are on an island, and we interviewed this woman, and she's very poor, and also from our project, we are doing pro-poor projects. But the woman in this video doesn't have any electricity and no water supply, and she's getting the water out of the river, and the water is full of pesticides, what she's saying. And from our work program, we're trying to have pro-poor projects. This is actually another location, but we are trying to get investors to provide water to the poor people. So that's also a part of our work program that we are doing. Next. So from the next slide, in the Mekong Delta, there was from the 90s into decades, there was a large extraction of groundwater extraction, and you see that it's increasing in this table. But on the blue line, you see that the freshwater groundwater volumes are getting more low, and this is related to the land subsidence in the Mekong Delta. What causes this land subsidence? There are many factors that are causing this land subsidence, like erosion, sand mining, but also groundwater extraction is one of those factors. And on the other side, we see that the sea level is rising, and that the tides are having also influence on the salinity intrusion. From the World Bank, there was a program to have fresh water from the west to the east to provide fresh water to the water companies. There were some difficulties to get this project started because there were some difficulties between the provinces. And so there was a new plan on the table to have smaller plants providing water to the provinces. But and there was also an advice to minimize the groundwater usage, but also to look in more to technology like desalination. So we're looking into an integrated solution, like Maarten was telling already. We had the discharge from the Mekong River is quite good from May till June, from May till November. But we see in the monsoon river, this water quality is very good also in the coastal provinces. In the dry season, we see that the water quality is having effects on salinity. And from January till May, we see this phenomena happening. And the coastal provinces having big problems from February till April. If we look into the modeling, we see in 2016, we saw that the salinity was almost reaching Kanto in 2016. But also from the modeling that we saw, this is related to the tides. And in the low tide from the sea, there is no salinity reaching Kanto. So there is a salinity intrusion. It's a big problem over a short period of time. So 1 or 2 months, and in excessively dry air, maybe 4 months. And what Maarten was mentioning, we have to examine our options. And we have to look into technical, sustainable, and carbon footprint. So we have to look in education, but also in the SDG, the energy, sustainable cities, and responsible consumption and production to have climate actions. So what do we know more about the Mekong Delta? We know the holistic systems of the VMD. We have more data mining, modelings, and ASR, where I'm going to tell more about. But there also is, from the industry, the innovation, and from water technology, there is capillary nanofiltration that can be a part, but also brackish seawater desalination to have and to make these climate actions. So what are we going to do in Mekong Delta and going to research with the pre-feasibility is going to what Maarten also said. You have to restore the water in the good season, to restore water and treat water into the aquifers, which also is slowing down the land subsidence in the Mekong Delta. And if we are looking in the dry season, when needed, we can pump the water from the groundwater and mix it up with the surface water treatment, so that we have water that complies with the Vietnamese or the WH standards. So we also have to look at those stakeholders. So we have from the Vietnamese side, we have Maarten, Monre, but also the local water companies who's working with us to realize these IDs. But also from the Dutch side, we have Deltares, who has a lot of experience on aquifer recharge. The Blue Dragon, that's a partnership from the waterschappen, and they can also provide some support on sluice gate management to keep the water quality very stable, and how can we manage that in the dry season. And wij, as water operator, we can also support with the experience that we have with the 10 water operators, utilities in the Netherlands. These are my contact details, so if you want more information, you can contact me or ask me some questions in now. Thank you.
Thanks, Romano. From Vietnam, it's good to mention that you're a project manager working for VAI in the water operator partnership with for the coastal provinces utilities in the Mekong Delta. I was wondering, this is still in a pilot stage. So looking a little bit back on that question that what I had earlier to Maarten, where he mentioned coordination of water resources management is a challenge. Is that also the case in the Mekong?
Yes, of course there is. There is, but there are also opportunities we recently also had a conference between the provinces to see how we can solve this problem about the salinity intrusion and how to manage this. And they are looking towards each other how they are going to solve that. It's I think a big problem in the Mekong Delta with the climate change that's going to happen. So we need all the resources from the Netherlands, but also from Vietnam to make it possible, because to restore the aquifers, we also need some laws and regulations. You don't want to ruin your groundwater, your good groundwater resources. So in that case, there have to be also some laws and regulations on that side. So yes, we have to look in a broader perspective of this ID.
Okay, so basically you're saying there is awareness of the issue. Provinces are trying to coordinate their actions, but also at the maybe a national level, there is a need to look in laws and regulations if we want to go forward into landscape solutions. Yeah.
Yes, and also there was already, because of the land subsidence, there was a decree 120 that limited the water companies to have groundwater extraction. Mm-hmm. So there is awareness from the government as well.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Romano, for now.
Thank you.
Interesting presentation and an interesting approach. Good luck with your demonstration project.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your time and for this opportunity to pitch.
I would like to move on to the next presenter, which is Lawrence Kimaru from Kenya, Nakuru, Kenya. And Lawrence is working in Nakuru County with the city of Nakuru, but also 2 other water utilities in the county, Naivasha and Nakuru Rural. And Lawrence, welcome. You're presenting a study and implementation that you're doing based on a water resources scarcity study and looking on how can we mitigate actually potential water scarcity in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much, Adrian, for the opportunity. As mentioned, my name is Lawrence Kimaru, and I work for VEI, currently through the Waterworks project. I'm the assistant project manager. And of course, I've been supporting the 3 water utilities through the time between VEI and the 3 water companies in Nakuru. Of course, one of the things that the utilities have discovered that they have to prepare themselves for the future. And one of the things that they decided to do is to take a head-on by confronting the current issues. So they decided to put together what we call a climate resilient water supply plan 2050. But before I go far, let me describe a little bit about Nakuru. So Nakuru is a county within Kenya. Of course, Kenya is within African continent. And of course, in Kenya, we have a decentralized system in which we have the national government and the county government. So Nakuru is just one of the 47 counties. So there are other smaller administrative areas. If you look at the map, relatively, you can say that, we have limited forest cover. And of course, that's where our journey starts. If you look, we have 3 water bodies, and mainly we have 2, one fresh water, that's Lake Naivasha, and then the rest are saline lakes. And of course, if you look at the built-up areas, it relatively looks quite small, but actually the population is quite big. Next slide, please. So as I've mentioned already, Nakuru, we have 3 water companies. That's Nakuru Water, Naivasha Water, and Nakuru Raw Water. And of course, they serve the bigger population of Nakuru County. The county itself is endowed with tourism and with a lot of flamingos. Of course, it's also the county is really growing quite fast. Of course, one of the towns, that's Nakuru town, is going to be elevated to a city status, and that also will bring other issues related to water provision. One of the things about Nakuru County is that it is a water scarce county, and of course we have water quality issues. Mainly, this is related to fluoride that is very high in our water bodies, and of course this is partly because of where Nakuru County lies. It lies in the Greater Rift Valley, and therefore water quality and water provision varies from one place to the next. Of course, the other item that our story we're talking about, the population growth is currently stands at 3.5%, and of course that would also bring other challenges. The other item that I've also mentioned is related to forest cover. So we've are facing quite a lot of deforestation and of course land degradation. One of the other unique item about Nakuru County is that we receive water from other counties, and therefore it means that there's quite a lot relates to water resource management. Next slide, please. So as I've mentioned that we're experiencing relatively different weather events. One of it has to do with rainfall events that are shorter, and there's quite a lot of surface runoff. On the left side, is one of the places where land has been degraded because of a lot of floods and a lot of rain events. On the right side, you can see a pipe that is standing. It's one of the pipes that provides water to residents of Nakuru County, and it has been totally dismantled because of the floods that cuts across that county. Next slide, please. So we've done quite a number of studies, and through the help of the support of Acacia Water, we've done a number of modeling to really look into these climate issues and how that is going to affect water provision and water demand in the future. And of course, on the left side, we're looking at best scenarios and worst scenarios. And over a period of time, towards 2050, we see that the temperature keeps on rising. And on the right side, as I've mentioned, that the population growth currently is standing at 3.05%. So the current population is at around 2.16 million people, and we estimate by the year 2050 the population will stand at around 5.4 million people. Next slide, please. So there are two issues that we are trying to address, one of which has to do with population growth, and the other has to do with the climate change. And of course, we're saying that there are other intervening parameters that we will be looking at, that is economic growth, land degradation, as well as other issues related to climate change, that is surface runoff. And of course, we're saying that with increased population growth, the demand for water will also increase. On the other hand, with increased climate change, having intermittent temperatures and rainfall, we'll also see decreased water availability. So currently, our main focus is to ensure that the larger population actually is able to get access to water by 2030. That is our primary goal for currently. But in the long run, we also have to come up with a mechanism to really meet the demand between 2030 and 2050. So the current demand stands at 80,000 cubic meters per day, but of course the water utilities are not able to meet even that demand. The second item, issue that we're also looking at is the demand for the 2050 actually grows to 380,000 cubic meters per day, and of course with the climate change being there, we've seen a lot of, based on the studies that we've done, this drop in groundwater levels. And of course, we are seeing also a lot of small rivers and streams drying up. Next slide. So and therefore, this means that, the utility needed to be upfront and to ensure that, they really safeguard, and of course, really looking at different ways to ensure that, there's enough water for the future. And of course, they came around, the concepts like sponge-city, and of course, as already been explained by Maarten, looking how do you retain, how do you recharge, and how do you reuse that water. But of course, for the water utilities, they decided to, start, looking for other stakeholders, who will be able to guarantee that there's enough water for the future. And of course, they came up with what we call the Climate Resilient Water Supply Plan 2050, looking at the water system adaptation measures. How do you restore, how do you increase water availability? And of course, that's why sponge-city concept came about. Of course, it has also looked into source protection measures in order to avoid, water pollution by, thinking about how do you create water protection zones. They're also looking into what we call infrastructure adaptation measures, that will reduce water losses, and it can include, having proper pipes and energy efficient, pumps, as well as reducing non-revenue water. One other item that they're also looking at is new and alternative water sources. But of course, how do you optimize even the current, water sources that they already have? With high non-revenue water, it means they still need to, balance whatever water sources they currently have. And then, of course, you can talk about water saving and reuse measures. Even at the household level, how do you ensure that people have proper system that uses less water to flush small fecal waste. Next slide, please. As I already explained, the mandate of the water utility is to supply water, and they mainly focus on increasing their infrastructure and also reducing non-revenue water. But on the other hand, they do not have mandate to protect, to cater for water resources, management. So they discovered that they cannot do this alone, and therefore they decided to have what we call a stakeholder, management platform. And of course, that has grown to what we call in a climate resilient water management steering committee, that has been established. Next slide, please. And of course, that means that, with the formation of the stakeholder platform, the different stakeholders are able to talk to each other. And of course, it's usually a process. It's not an event. They need to, they need to talk to each other. They need to build trust, and therefore, they have to talk, one language, and they have to move towards the same direction. That's why they decided to gazette the steering committee. Of course, it's we looked at a number of stakeholders, but looking at the matrix, we decided to go with the ones that have high influence and high interest. And of course, this process has been driven by the water utility, given the fact that they are going to be on the receiving end if water resources are not properly managed. And of course, there are some deliverables that the steering committee has been able to achieve. One of it, they've been able to put up a terms of reference for themselves. They've been able to identify, where resources can be mobilized. We've also done, field exposure visits, and of course they've been able to do the climate resilient water supply plan 2050. And currently, the next phase of the Waterworks project is really, looking at how do we implement that plan. Next slide, please.
Lawrence, 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Thanks, Lawrence. Yeah, very interesting. I think Maarten already referred to your presentation as an example where coordination is taken up by on a higher level by the Nakuru County government, which is actually a result of the study into the water resources challenges that Nakuru County will be facing in the coming decades. We have this forecast for 30 years approximately. I was wondering, you have any idea, because your water demand will almost go by 5 from 80,000 to 380,000. What would be the potential role of landscape solutions in mitigating that water demand? So what is your expectation there?
Thank you, Adrian, for the question. So the expectation right now for the county government of Nakuru, as well as for the utilities, is to, basically, how do you ensure that the current water sources that are available are properly managed? How do you optimize the current water sources? How do you reduce on land revenue water? How do you ensure that there's proper stakeholder engagement, between the different stakeholders? Because if you talk about the current water issues in Nakuru, relates to how for a long time the discussion in boundaries, but now the different stakeholders have to think best ways to go out, outside the political boundaries and looking into the catchment approach, and therefore that's the reasons why they decided to have this steering committee. And of course, we've identified a number of measures. One of them has to do with the responsivity, but of course there are many others, MIR, and the hope is that some of these measures can be implemented in the long run. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Lawrence. Very, very clear. Congratulations on this level of interaction that you've managed to realize in this particular case.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
We'll move into the next presentation by Daniel Truneh. He's normally sitting in Addis Ababa. I'm not sure now, but you're working with, collaborating with the Addis Ababa Water Sewerage Authority. And I think you have a very interesting presentation about the water resources challenges in the catchment of Addis Ababa. So welcome, Daniel.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you also for the organizers. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the AIWW2021 project and how it was really the inception of this project. The challenges of a water company, a utility, is not really any different than what has been really mentioned by Maarten, Romano, as well as Adrian and Lawrence. Basically, we are facing population growth that has been basically a cross-cutting issue, which has been mentioned by all presenters. But we have also a decreasing per capita availability of water. That's what which automatically flow from the growth of population. Because of that, you have increased conflict and competition. That's what we have been really noticing. And this competition is even beyond sectors and beyond institutions. But also there is a conflict with the environment as well. Water for the people, water for reproduction, for nature, as well as for the industry. So it's urban agriculture, the haves and the have-nots, upstream, downstream, national and international, as we may have even recently witnessed. So these are really like, felt by the water company, and water companies are not really naturally endowed with knowledge about catchment management, integrated water resource management, because they have been focused on water supply from the reservoir through various pipelines to the household. So the challenge, although they are filling it with level of siltations in their reservoir, they did not know what to do about that. And the inception of this project is also from that. The project location is Lagdadi and Derre. Those are the main water sources for Addis Ababa Water and Storage Authority, which is basically supplying water for over 5 million people. It's the largest in the country. And after a lot of trials and errors, basically me and Adrian, we came up with this, the idea of really developing this project, which is, the value of 9 million euro, financed by the Dutch Embassy, the local authorities here, even the water utility, and also Viten's Vida Center. Next slide, please. Next, please. Thank you. These are basically the implementing partners and the beneficiary partners, and also the financiers of this project, whereby the Dutch Embassy takes the lion's share, and co-financed by the various partners, including by the other third. Please, next slide. The direct beneficiaries are really 113,000 people who are living in the catchment areas in the adjacent satellite cities to Addis Ababa. Next slide, please. Now, I basically highlighted a little bit on the problem. The problems are basically water demand, production. Always the demand is tilting the balance, as you may know. And then we have really like problems related to quality. We have problems related to quantity. We have the problems related to also efficiently using water. So the balance is always tilting, I would say, on the side of really there is more demand, there is problems with quality, quantity, and also issues related to efficiency. So the population grows. I think I mentioned that one as well. Land degradation, which is basically setting up the reservoirs to the level that the reservoirs cannot be used anymore, which is basically will turn into a farmland. So that is also another serious problem that we are facing. And then wetland loss.
Daniel, I think your connection is... So I think we have to try to get Daniel back online. So maybe we should let's maybe move into the discussion for now and see whether we can have Daniel back online and get the connection restored. Romano, you're still there. There is a question of Peter Barefoots for you. And
Okay.
You already your presentation was about the salt intrusion in the river system of the Mekong Delta, which has gives challenges to freshwater abstraction of freshwater supply to the cities in the especially the provincial regions of the Mekong Delta. You're mentioning aquifer recharge as an option to overcome that seasonality. Are you aware of the other regions in the region, and I suppose that would be Asia, that are facing similar challenges? And if so, do you involve their solutions? How do they work with that salt intrusion?
I didn't work with the other countries yet, but I know that from Indonesia they have the same issues as well with salinity intrusion. And also in Bangladesh, we have seen this happening, but there are some similarities. But it's also quite new, new in this region to do aquifer recharge. In the Netherlands, we already have it like for 30 years, but and there is some development with Deltares on to implement this also in more regions. They have implemented in Chile, and I think in Spain they are doing this, in America. So it's not very broad that they are doing aquifer recharge.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have to be aware of the aquifers, how much water they can store. So that's why we are starting up the pre-feasibility and the feasibility to see if the aquifers are suitable for seasonal storage. So yes, we have contact with the other partners as well and no, it have to be developed in a certain way. It's a quite Dutch experience that we have here.
Okay. Yeah, Maarten, then maybe to you, because you are, of course, very experienced from different countries, and having knowledge about various landscape solutions. Say, if such aquifer recharge approach, is that something that what would resolve all issues that we see on what scarcity, or what do you see in general as the role of landscape buffering in resolving water stress?
Yeah, I think in certain conditions where you have a good aquifer in which you can enter fresh water and keep it there, it's a good solution. But for instance, on the African Shield, you have these very low permeability water reserves, and you couldn't bring much water into these. So then you need other solutions, and part of it is storing water for agriculture so that you are more efficient in your food production. And by doing in-stream measures, you might recharge groundwater below the river systems to a higher extent than is currently happening. And in that case, with sand dams or so, you can extract water. Normally we do that via vertical wells, but an innovation might be that you put a horizontal drain in such a system, and that you can then extract more water from such a sand dam system. So so far, it's a rather, although these measures are really old, in Burkina Faso they have been doing this for hundreds of years. To work with that on a larger scale and to provide water to larger communities, that's a new thing. And we're looking into how to do that most efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a field of work that's still under development, and we need pilots and especially monitoring, which is lacking in often lacking in this system, to know how we could make them function more efficiently. So I think it's you have to take a local look at the conditions and then decide which intervention is most suitable for that area. And we have a whole host of interventions that you could do, and aquifer recharge is one of these. But you can also build stone bunds, small interventions to encourage infiltration, look at water quality impacts by doing certain intervention. So it's an exciting field of research, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what would be the next steps if you look at it from where we are now to go to scale? Because there is a big urgency if you look at all the figures you presented with regard to the population growth and the more extremity in rainfalls, but also the period between rains.
Yeah. I think the next step is to link all these actions together in an integrated approach, that you look at your downstream side. You can also look what you can do upstream to improve water quality and quantity on a downstream level. And we are now in a World Bank project for the Sahel, in which we develop a website where you can click on any pixel in the Sahel and see what measures, what interventions would be suitable. And that's a first step to make decisions on what you would do somewhere. And the next step is then to decide with all the stakeholders in the catchment what you are going to do where to improve the water management for the whole area so that everybody profits.
Yes.
And so organization is one of the things that I think is really important. The technical stuff we know, but how to organize the community to work with these interventions that might not directly benefit them, but benefit people downstream. That's the question.
Yes. And would you think that in a case like Nakuru, where the water demand will be increasing 5 times, like Lawrence mentioned, would you think that water buffering would be enough to resolve the challenges they face in the coming 30 years?
I think it's difficult. And I'm really worried about population growth in Africa. And I think that all these programs should come with a population growth extension or planning component, because that's climate change is one thing affecting supply, but demand is skyrocketing in some of these countries. If you look at a number of countries, the half of the population is below 20 years old. They will still have kids. They all need to be fed, and they will have to drink clean water. And I'm quite, myself, my personal opinion is that I fear the future for these people. So that we are fast enough to curb population growth and to implement measures such that everybody can get a fair share of food and drinking water.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that all our programs should have a population growth component, looking at how you can change the demand or minimize or do something about the growth there. But I think that's a very difficult issue.
Okay, thanks, Maarten. Yeah, we're almost at the end of the session. If I try to summarize what we've seen, I think there is a lot of options for using landscape solutions as buffering for water, temporary water storage. It could be seasonal water storage or for longer periods. Overall, there is a big demand predicted for water in the future. And if you look on your graphs on increased urban growth, there is a strong need for more buffering solutions, and also for coordination from water resource authorities to do so. Will not be the only solution. We need multiple solutions to overcome that water stress for the future. But we think, and we also see that in our programs, that landscape solutions are at least a partial solution, which will overcome some of the immediate challenges that we are facing. So I think it's a plea also from our side to have a much faster upscaling of that approach. I think we're at the end of the session, and I would like to give the word back to the organization, the Amsterdam International Water Week. Thank you for the opportunity to have this session and to present some of our work. Unfortunately, the last presenter was disconnected due to internet problems. I just received a call, but it was impossible to get him back. His presentation was about the degradation of the catchment in Addis Ababa and the program that's is currently starting and running actually to resolve that. But that will be for next time.
Thank you all for attending the presentation. We hope to see you in next session.
Goodbye.
Okay,
Goodbye.
thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you for attending.